All right. So now that we're all warmed up, let's turn our attention to this morning's keynote speaker. We're very, very excited to welcome former educator and comedian Jack Gallagher. As a parent of an autistic child, Jack will share with us his unique take on raising a child with special needs.
Yeah, in the early 1980s, Jack moved from the K-12 classroom to the comedy clubs of Boston and Los Angeles, where he developed a trademark style of combining humor with an important message.
Sorry. Easy for you to say. Like I can talk. A three-time Emmy Award winner for his work on PBS, Jack is the author of 6 plays, including A Different Kind of Cool, exploring the differences between his 2 sons and coming to terms with the fact that coolness is a matter of perspective.
Yeah, combining the instincts of being a parent with the skills and training of an educator, Jack is here to share that when 2 groups work together in unison, they can build understanding, perspective, and celebration.
Let's give a warm welcome to our very good friend, Jack Gallagher.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I take great solace in knowing that I am the least technically savvy person in the room. I feel good about that. Nobody's going to ask me any questions because I'm just going to have that blank look on my face, and I'm hoping that I have enough skill to run the clicker for my slides. I'm not kidding, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm old. I am old, 62. People say that's not old. It's the oldest I've ever been. It's incredibly scary to be this age. I'll tell you how old I am, and some of you will be able to relate. About a week ago, I was at my house, and I dropped something on the floor. Dropped it on the floor. I spent a good 15, 20 seconds trying to figure out if that was important enough for me to bend over and pick up. Some of you relate to that? Yes. And the rest of you will. Just wait a couple of years. But you know what I did? I was upstairs in my house. I kicked it over to the landing of the stairs. I walked down enough stairs that I was level with the landing, and I picked it up, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is genius. So I'm here today to share my story with you, and I'm really excited about being here, and I thank the ISTE folks for inviting me. I want to start today by talking about cool for a second. The aura of cool, right? We all know what cool is. In fact, cool is an interesting and strange concept because it's different for all of us. We all know it when we see it. It might be different for different age groups, but we all want to be cool. We all want to be considered cool. You want to be called cool. That's really cool. That's kind of cool. Wow, that's unbelievably cool. If I asked you for a definition of cool, you wouldn't give me a definition. You'd give me an example, right? A car, shoes, a handbag, a musician, an actor. That's really cool. And cool is different for everyone. By age group, it's different, right? But you know it when you see it, and you want to be it. For me, the Beatles. Now, here's the other thing. Cool is not immediately cool. Sometimes it takes a while to get used to something being cool. When you first see it, you're a little thrown off by it. You don't know if it's cool. For me, it was the Beatles, for my generation, whatever it is for yours. When I first saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, I was enamored immediately. I looked and thought, oh my God, I want to do that. My father was completely thrown off. What the hell is that? What's with the hair? My father was a lunch bucket Irish Catholic guy from Boston. There's no collars on those suits. It's not music, that's noise. 3 or 4 years later, my dad had a Nehru jacket, sideburns. My dad was cool. Here's the other thing about cool, and this might be the most important thing today for me to talk to you about. Most of us do not have the capacity to create our own cool. We don't have the confidence to do that. We don't have enough self-esteem or self-confidence to create our own cool. We wait for a while until someone else does something, until it catches on, and then, okay, we can be part of it because that's really cool. You want some examples? Tattoos. Right? I don't have tattoos. I don't get them. I'm not criticizing. Seriously, I'm not criticizing. I just don't get them. I don't. I'm an old guy. I like this shirt. I don't want to wear it every day for the rest of my life. Beards. All of a sudden, beards are totally hip. Beards are really cool. Socks. Crazy socks for guys. When did that happen? 5 years ago, people would have thought you'd gotten dressed in the dark. Now you see those crazy polka dots and stripes and fans sticking out from under that Brooks Brothers suit because it's cool, because everybody else did it. Cool is unique. Cool is out of the ordinary. Cool is one of a kind. And then it gets watered down, and it isn't cool anymore. I never had the courage to be cool as a kid. I was a very self-conscious kid, extremely shy. My parents, before they passed away, was amazed at what I do for a living because they said, my mother said, you used to hide behind my skirt the whole time. I never liked Halloween as a great example. I hated Halloween, hated it. It was humiliating for me to get dressed up in a costume and beg for penny candy. I hated that. My parents would say, go, it's good for you, do it. So I do it. And the same thing would happen every year. You'd knock on the door, some woman would open the door and say, well, what do we have here? Really? You want me to say it out loud? Not humiliating enough for you? The big red nose, the floppy shoes, the fright wig didn't. I'm a clown. Are you happy, lady? Now, the weird thing is, I have 2 boys. My kids growing up loved Halloween, loved it. My oldest son, Declan, when he was about 6, Declan is an old Irish name. If you're not familiar with it, loosely translated, it means, oh my God, why would you call me this? Declan wanted to be a vampire. So he's 24 now. This is long before all that Twilight stuff. He wanted to be a vampire. And he wanted a coffin. And he drew up a picture of the coffin, and I had to build the coffin. And when Halloween came along, he got in the coffin. These are my instructions. I'm to put the coffin in a wagon. I was to drag it around the neighborhood, drag it up to front doors, ring the bell, and wait on the sidewalk. When they opened the door, he would flip that lid up, sit up and say, trick or treat, I want to suck your blood. People were dumping their entire buckets of candy, I'm not kidding, into the coffin. When his younger brother, Liam, was about 6, he wanted to be a train for Halloween. I said to my wife, I can't believe with as much as I hated Halloween, I'm spending weeks building costumes. Liam wanted to be a train. When it was built, I got in trouble because the cow catcher was not correct on the train. The point is, kids are different from their parents. The point is, kids are different from each other. Sometimes they're extremely different. When my son Liam was 7 years old, he was diagnosed with autism, ASD, autism spectrum disorder. We saw the signs in Liam. There were signs that we saw. The word was in our head. We never said the word. This is a bright kid. He started reading at 4. And I'll tell you how he started reading. We were on vacation. My wife was sitting in our cottage reading a newspaper. He walked behind her and read an entire AT&T ad from top to bottom. My wife said, Did you do something with him? I said, no, I'm going to teach him how to read ads out of the newspaper. Yeah, that's what I do. But we saw signs along the way, right? There were certain things that just weren't making a little bit of sense. And the word, like I said, was in our head, but we never said it out loud. It's different when someone else says it to you. And I remember sitting across from the child psychologist's desk, and she said, Liam is a very bright, happy, well-adjusted child. However, she's already said all the good stuff. He exhibits characteristics consistent with the diagnosis of autism. And your heart sinks. because there is nothing worse in the world than thinking that there is something wrong with your child. You know, when your kids are born, if you're a parent, you know the first thing you do on the natural is you check them out. Count their fingers and their toes to make sure they've got 10 of each. You run your finger across the front of their face to see if their eyes track. You stand behind them and snap your fingers to see if they listen. And everything was on track with Liam. He hit all the milestones. Both my wife and I are former teachers. We watched the milestones, and then suddenly something started to happen. Well, why is it happening now? And you know what you think? You know what you can't help but think? Is this my fault? Is there something that I did wrong? Did I not pay enough attention to him? Did I pay too much attention to him? Am I to blame for this? And anybody who's gone through anything like this with a child knows that you lie in bed at night and you stare at the ceiling and you wonder why, what if, what do I do now? And I'll tell you something, that feeling goes away pretty quickly. It went away pretty quickly with me because this is where we are. This is what's happening. There's nothing we can do to change this, so let's move forward and see what happens with this. Because again, there's nothing in the world that feels worse than thinking that there's something wrong with your kid. We knew he needed help. When he started school, he was falling behind very quickly. So my wife and I said, we will pay for an aide. We knew as teachers, we will bring an aide into the classroom and we will work with them. They said, no, you can't do that. You have to go through the district, you have to get a diagnosis, and once you get the diagnosis, you can get the aide. We did not want him to get a diagnosis, and I will tell you why. We weren't denying anything. We didn't want him to have a label. We knew as soon as he had a label, he would carry that with him for the rest of his life because we love labels. We love them. It makes things so much easier. We don't have to think. We just associate the stereotype that goes with the label, and we move forward. Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, fat, skinny, straight, gay, smart, dumb, pretty, ugly. He's a Republican, don't need to know anymore, doesn't have a heart. I don't need to meet him. Democrat, oh, liberal, okay, going to spend all my money. I don't need to know anything about that. We didn't want that label because we knew as soon as we gave him a label, people would associate what they knew with that label or what they thought they knew about autism. A lot has changed since Liam was diagnosed. He's going to be 20 in November. He was diagnosed at 7. So in those 13 years, we've come a long way with autism. When he was diagnosed, all people knew about autism was Rain Man. He's not Rain Man. He can't tell you how many toothpicks have fallen out of the box on the floor. That's not him. But we knew he would carry that label and we didn't want it. But we also knew he needed help. We were at ends as his parents. This is a very bright kid. We want him in a mainstream classroom. We don't want him separated from everyone else. So we did the testing, we got the diagnosis, we got the aid. Now what do? I knew very little about autism, very, very little. So I decided I would learn as much as I could. As a former teacher, I knew that if I got to the root of the issue, there might be some way that I could help him move forward. I could help him overcome this. So I started to look at the history. First mistake I made is that I went on the internet. I don't know if you've ever been on the internet. Crazy stuff, man. It's all kinds of people with crazy ideas and theories and cures and all kinds of stuff. But I'm going to really quickly, and we're going to move through this really quick, I'm going to give you a brief history of what I know about autism. Okay? The term autism was coined in 1912 by Eugen Bleuler, who was a Swiss psychiatrist. The word comes from the Greek word self, auto, which means self. And Bleuler used it to describe people he was working with who he had a sense of morbid self-admiration and a withdrawal from themselves, not only withdrawal from themselves, but a withdrawal from society. In 1943, Leo Kanner, who was an American child psychologist, started working with a group, 45, started working with a group of 11 children. He was studying them. He found that these kids had difficulty adapting to routine, they had a sensitivity to stimuli, they had good memories, and they had a propensity to have a certain resistance to food and to repeat certain words. All of this stuff reminds me of Liam. Liam has this particular diet that he keeps to. He has a propensity to do certain activities that we'll get into in a minute. Hans Asperger, most of you know the Asperger term for autism. His work mirrored Connor's. he worked with kids who did not repeat words, but spoke like adults. So already we're seeing that there's a difference. Everybody's not the same. There's a difference in these kids. These guys I'm not crazy about. Bruno Bettelheim. Bruno Bettelheim claimed that the issue with autism was coldness of the parents. The mothers weren't emotional enough with the kids. As a result, kids were taken out of their homes and they were sent to mental institutions or foster homes. I'm using the terminology of the time. He thought that the problem stemmed from mental retardation. So these kids are taken away from their parents and they're put in mental institutions. Bernard Rimland was a child I like this guy. He was a child psychologist. He was also the parent of an autistic child, and he knew that it was not his wife or his parenting styles. So I could go on and on and on. I could explain more to you about the history of this stuff. It goes on. There are people who believed that the way to get these kids back in line was corporal punishment. We can beat it out of them. Through the 70s and 80s, it was still referred to as a problem with mental retardation. So how does this help me? All right, I know all this stuff. How does it help me? I'm not a scientist. I'm a comedian, and I'm the father of a child with autism. He is not an autistic child. Let's make that difference. He is a child with autism. Now, I'm lucky enough to live in Sacramento, California, which is the home of the UC Davis Mind Institute, which is one of the foremost institutes of research for neurological study in the United States and the world. The UC Davis Mind Institute was started by a group of families in Northern California who had kids on the spectrum. That's a term you hear all the time with autism. The autism spectrum. They call it the spectrum because so little is known, more is being known now, about autism, that anything that is categorized as autism is put under this giant umbrella known as the spectrum. This is a huge range. We're talking about kids who will never have any verbal capacity to kids who know more about computers than you're going to know at any point in your life, and they know it at 14. This is a huge range. This is frustrating as a parent. How are you going to treat kids who have the same label that are so far apart? All right, so what are the causes, right? Maybe if we know the causes, we can figure out what's going on. We don't know. We don't know. That's a gross generalization, but it's not untrue. There are theories, but nobody knows for sure what causes autism. One of the theories is that it's called the accelerated brain theory. One side of the brain reacts to things quicker than other sides of the brain. I'm going to show you a very scientific demonstration. All right, so in order for everything to work correctly, the gears have to mesh, right? So you learn how to crawl, then you learn how to walk, then you learn how to speak, and you read and you write. Well, the accelerated brain theory, and again, this is a very scientific demonstration I'm giving to you. The accelerated brain theory says some parts of the brain get more activity than others, and the gears don't mesh correctly. So that's a theory, that's all. And I have read articles. I have read printed and published papers trying to understand this as my kid. Here's an article that I read. Let's see this slide. Okay. Cortical activation and synchronization during sentence comprehension in high-functioning autism, evidence of underconnectivity. Don't you love the way they put the little subtitle at the end? Like that's going to make it easier to understand? Oh, evidence of underconnectivity. Why didn't you say so in the first place? Look, the internet is full of theories. It's full of articles. What they're hoping will happen is that over time, this giant umbrella known as the spectrum will be broken down into smaller umbrellas with a cause associated and some sort of research developed for each one. All right, so you probably at this point know the types of autism. There's Asperger's, there's Rett syndrome. Rett syndrome is primarily girls, oddly enough. Now, most standard autism, boys. 80% of those with Rett syndrome are girls. High-functioning autism, child disintegrative disorder. When Liam was diagnosed, he had none of these. This was not his diagnosis. Liam's was the most popular, common diagnosis at the time. Some of you are familiar with PDD, NOS. That stands for pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. You have a pervasive disorder. Pervasive meaning to spread throughout an entire area. Spring pervaded the air. A pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. You've got a problem. That's all we can tell you. Good luck. That's like saying you have a broken bone. We're having a hard time finding it. So what do I do now? That's the diagnosis. There's no pill, there's no shot you can take. My concern was to help Liam in the classroom and socially. That was my concern, and I was very confident as a former teacher that I could make that happen. When I look back on it, what I was trying to do was fix him. That's not what I thought I was doing at the time, believe me, but it's exactly what I was doing. I thought if we worked hard and we worked together, we could get to where we needed to be. And where I thought he needed to be is where everyone else his age was at that time. I was going to fix him so that he fits in with everybody else. That was my goal. He had a label. That's as far as we're going to let it go. He has an aid. For the time being, let's see what happens. So I started to look into how these kids learn. Now, as educators, you know different kids learn in different ways, right? Some kids are auditory learners, some kids are visual learners, some kids are hand-on. Listen, when I taught learning disabled kids. I hate that term, disabled. I taught LD kids, so the irony is not lost on me. Research has shown that most kids with autism use one style of learning. It didn't take me long to realize that Liam was a visual learner. If he could see it, and to a lesser degree touch it, it made a lot more sense to him. So his entree is visual with a side order of hands-on. So I started making charts and graphs and games and flashcards and mazes. I worked so hard on making these things for him that I started to neglect my own career. I'm not asking you to think I'm a martyr, because I wasn't. If you have kids, you know you will do anything you have to do to help them. In fact, when he was in the 5th grade, his math book was so confusing to me and to him that I rewrote the entire math book to make it more clear. We called it the Blue Book, and it was on the table every night when we did our homework. Here's the page on fractions, explaining how the rudiments of fractions. I worked really hard with this kid. We worked hard every single night because I know he can do it. I know we can lick it. And it wasn't just homework. There are social issues with Liam. I started to learn a little bit more through his speech therapist and through his occupational therapist about the way Liam learns and lives his life, and I started to understand it a little bit better. For instance, we use nonverbal social cues all day long. If I'm talking and I look down at the front row and I make eye contact with someone, your immediate reaction is to nod your head to let me know you're following along. Who taught you how to do that? Did your parents teach you to nod your head? Did you read it in a book? No. You picked it up through osmosis. You saw other people doing it, so you did it because you wanted to fit in. Liam doesn't do that. Liam just looks at you. It's a little disconcerting. Or he'll look away from you. And it used to drive me crazy. We'd be doing homework and I'd say, Liam, right here, look at me, look at me. I'm listening. You're not listening if you're not looking at me. How insane is that? So I was talking to his occupational therapist one day and I was explaining this to her, and she had a really interesting theory. And so I will explain it to you by asking you to do this. Think about all the things that are happening in this room right now. This is a nice set, man. It's all kinds of skyline stuff, pretty colors, lots of colors up there. This room's filled with people with different colored clothing on. Everybody that's wearing glasses has a reflection coming off those glasses. My voice is echoing throughout the room. If you listen carefully, there's a hum in this room. Imagine if all of those things garnered as much of your attention as the sound of my voice. Imagine if all of those things had equal representation in your head as the sound of, how confusing would that be? How hard would it be to follow along? So what Liam would do is he would find a spot on the wall where there was nothing to look at but a blank space, and that blocked out all the visual stuff. He was trying to attend. I just didn't get it. I was stuck in a more traditional way of thinking. I didn't understand that there are other ways that he could attend. Other things that now make total sense to me. When Liam was in the 7th grade, he had a science teacher whose room was filled with stuff. I mean, there was everything in this room, from science equipment to posters to clever sayings. There were pictures of things. There was a life-size cutout of Mr. Peanut the guy from the peanut can. I don't know what he had to do with science, but he was there. And he called us in for a meeting, and he said, Liam seems a little distracted. And I think that's what he said, because I was busy looking at the stuff in the room. And when we left, my wife said, did you see all the stuff in the room? And I said, yeah, pretty cool, right? And she just looked at me like, I still didn't get it. I was still saying to him, pay attention, Liam, pay attention. I'm trying to pay attention, Dad. I'm trying really hard. Homework time was the worst. It was contentious. It was tough. We had terrible nights with, I'm not kidding, man, crying, yelling. It was definitely costing us in our relationship. Liam has other issues. He stims. Stimming is a repetition of certain sounds, words, physical movements. It is speculated that stimming brings somebody back to the center. It calms them. I've asked Liam why he does it, and he says it makes him feel better. He used to jump up and down as a kid. We called it the happy dance. We all stim. You twirl your hair, you bite the end of your pencil, you're stimming. Liam, when he gets excited or nervous, even really happy, shakes his hands violently. He'll grab his fist, put his hand over it, and push it against his forehead. It's obvious, and it's unusual. And it's very difficult for me to admit this, but I was embarrassed by it. I was embarrassed by my son. We would stand at the corner after school waiting for the light to change with the rest of the parents, and I would just pray to God that he wouldn't start stimming. It's all right. It's another thing to work on. We'll just work on that too. And we kept working harder and harder. But we weren't getting where I thought we should be. We were coming up short. Each session began with a fight even before we sat down at the dining room table to do homework. And it culminated one night, the last final straw. I got frustrated with him and I yanked on his ear because I thought he wasn't listening. And I hurt him. He still brings it up. Remember that time you yanked on my ear? Like, all right, can we get past that, please? So I decided I needed more help. I decided I couldn't do this alone, not just with me. I needed help not only from Liam, but I needed help from his teachers, and I needed help from the therapist. Your first impulse as a parent is to protect your child, always. And you never want to think that there is something from which you can't protect them. Sometimes these moments show up, and you don't realize what's happening until after it's over, that you've been taught a lesson. Sometimes they're glaring and they're scary. We spend our summers on Cape Cod. Both my wife and I are from Massachusetts. We live in California. We come back home every year to Cape Cod. One day, we live very close to the beach. Liam and I went to the beach alone to set up. It was early in the morning. Sometimes we'll spend 8 or 9 hours at the beach, right? So Liam and I went down alone to set up. And my brother-in-law had a surfboard that he would just keep in the high grass, and the kids would pull it into the water, and they'd stand on it, pretend they were surfing, whatever. So Liam grabbed the board, and he started down to the water, and I don't know why I didn't have a life jacket on that day. I don't know if the tide, I don't remember. But like any parent, I'm setting up, and I'm looking over my shoulder every 10 seconds to make sure he's okay. Well, I look up at this one point, and Liam's on the board. He's about 25 or 30 yards out. There's an offshore breeze, and it's pushing him out. And he's standing on the surfboard. So I panic, and I run, I dive into the water, and I start to swim for him. This is probably a good time to tell you that I'm a terrible swimmer. I mean, I can swim, but not to save my life, and certainly not to save anybody else's. But I didn't even think of that. As a parent, these are one of these moments. I just jumped in the water, and I started to swim, and as hard as I was swimming, the current was taking him out. He's standing up. He's 4 years old. He can't swim. At this point, he's in at least 10 feet of water, and if he falls off that board, he's dead. And I just started screaming for help. I didn't care if I looked uncool. I didn't care. I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating, the loudest I have ever screamed in my life for help. My brother came over the ridge. He heard me, grabbed a kayak and started out. Our neighbor next to us over here grabbed his kayak and started. The lifeguard at the public beach 200 yards away heard me screaming for help. She grabbed her surfboard and started. And my brother paddled past me, and I remember not even being able to say anything to him. I was choking. I was scared to death. Everything was in slow motion except for that current pushing him out. They finally got to him. He jumped into the kayak. They brought him back, and I sat on that beach, and I shook for an hour. And I didn't take my eyes off him for the rest of that day. That was one of those moments where you realize you can't do this by yourself. If I was trying to do it by myself, it wasn't going to work. He wasn't going to make it. So now I knew that I needed help, and I knew that what I was doing wasn't working. The techniques that I had used for Liam to try and teach Liam were not working. So we moved on. I started working with his teachers. I got in touch with his teachers, and I started asking them for help. I decided to ease up on him. We would still work together. I would act as his point person, but I stepped back a little. I spoke to his teachers. I used to get his assignments a couple of weeks ahead of time so that I'd know what was coming up and I could prep him for that, so when it happened in class, he already knew what was going to happen. I was very careful how I acted with the teachers. I'm a former teacher. I hated when parents used to come to parent-teacher conferences and say, "You know, I used to teach." Yeah, you taught basket weaving at 14 as a junior counselor at camp. Be quiet. You know what I'm talking about. As soon as you hear a parent say, "I used to teach," you go, "Oh, geez, great, here we go." But I let them take the lead, and I started to see one more time, seriously, all the things that I loved about Liam that I was trying to take away from him. I started to see all of those things that just made me so proud of him and so happy. I started to see how he handled things on his own, the things that he could do, the things that I loved before I started to squelch that stuff. This is a very creative kid. My son is a very creative kid. He's a big fan of The Simpsons, okay? Loves animation. One night he came to me and he said, "Dad, I'm going to write a Simpsons script." Now, if you're a parent, it's the end of the day, you're tired, you've been listening to stuff all day, and I didn't blow him off, but I blew him off. You know what I'm saying? "I'm going to write a script." I said, "Good for you. Why don't you do that in the other room?" He would come to me occasionally and he would say, "Script's coming along great." And I'd say, "Good for you. Go get him. Over there." So one night I'm putting him to bed. I see the script on his desk and I pick it up and read it. I've written on a bunch of sitcom staffs. It's not bad. The form's off, but he knows the Simpsons characters' voices. He's got a storyline, and it's pretty funny. And I said, "Liam, this is pretty good." And he said, "I know. Let's send it to Fox." Okay, Fox isn't going to read it. Fox doesn't take anything that hasn't been commissioned. If it shows up uncommissioned, it goes in the trash or it goes right back, because, really simple, if they read it and then something that they write inadvertently contains something in that script, you get sued. I explained that to Liam. He said, "But it's really good, they'll love it, send it to them." So I put it in an envelope, I sent it off, fully knowing what was going to happen. I forgot about it. About a month later, he came to me and said, "Dad, it's been like a month. When's my script going to be on the air?" So I was talking to a friend of mine who's a writer in LA, and I told him this story. He said, "It's really funny, man." He said, "Listen, I have a couple of friends on the Simpsons staff. I'm going to tell them that story." A couple of weeks later, Liam gets a letter in the mail from the Simpsons, thanking him for writing the script, explaining why they couldn't use it. But keep writing. They encouraged him. Keep writing. Maybe someday you'll be a writer on a staff too. They told him to keep writing. I told him not to send it. I thought I was helping. Liam's a gamer, loves video games, can tell you anything about any video game, when it was created, when it was first published, when it's coming out in Japan, what the different titles are, everything. I have spent so much time online looking for Nintendo 64s that I can't tell you. And every time I tell this story, somebody says, "Boy, you should have told me. We had one in our cellar. We just threw it away a week ago." Thanks, because I just spent $500 having one shipped from Guam. He's got a pretty amazing imagination. When he was in the 4th or 5th grade, we started to hear about these characters that he'd tell us stories about these guys. They all came from a city that he created in his head. It's Cat Ring City. It's in Florida. Cat Ring City was established in 1945. And Cat Ring City is the home of Parker, Doug, Leonard, Boris, and Bill. These are all teenage characters who all live together. They've all got a different look. Liam made up this entire story of these people. And he would tell us stories about Parker and his pack. That was the name of the group. When he was in the 6th grade, he decided he wanted to make a replica of Cat Ring City for his 6th grade art show. He wanted to use things we had around the house, only things we could find around the house. He drew up a blueprint, and we spent weeks building Cat Ring City. There it is. Had an elevated railroad track. It had a television station, a police station, it had a city hall, it had an airport, it had construction equipment. Everything had to be in the right place. I was told that the forklift was in the wrong place. It had to be moved over here. All of this from the imagination of an 11-year-old kid. Not bad. I realize now that I was trying to squelch that imagination. Liam's a computer guy. Spends a lot of time on the computer. I thought it was impeding our progress. I'm an old person. I use computers as a giant typewriter. I don't like computers because they make me feel old. The technology doesn't make me feel old. You know when I feel old? When I'm filling out a form online and it asks for my date of birth and that list of years pops up. Where's 1953? Where is it? And you know what? There's a whole chunk of like the 70s I don't remember. 73 to 75? Yeah, I was around. I'm not giving you any information. When I decided I couldn't do it alone, I sought help from his teachers. Some were more interested than others. Some told me they couldn't do it. Others jumped right in. By the time we got to high school, we knew that technology had to be a part of Liam's life no matter how much I couldn't connect with it. So we found a school that's a member of the New Technology Network. And the fit was perfect. And Liam started to thrive. It now seems absolutely natural to me that when a student is involved in the decision making as to how they're going to learn, they're going to be more excited about it. I have spoken to teachers who say, I can't have a lesson plan for every single kid. That's true. But if you allow the child or student to be involved in the process, to be involved in something that interests them in the first place, in this case with Liam, computers, I found that he was more excited about doing the work. He was more excited about planning and helping as to how the work would get done. Liam was more willing to do the work because he was involved in the decision as to how the work would get done. It makes total sense to me now. Don't you want to be involved in the decisions as to how your job gets done? Do you want to be told, this is how you do the work? Don't add anything of your own. Do it this way. Don't you want to bring something of yourself to the job? Liam's job at that point was going to school. That's his life. Let him be involved in the process as to how it happens, how he learns. I'm not saying he makes up the lesson plan. I'm saying ask him, can you add something to this? What do you think we might be able to do? His teachers saw it too. His teachers saw that he was more confident in class. I told you that he loves animation, right? And I'm running out of time, but I got to squeeze this stuff in. He loves animation. After a while, he decided that the Parker and the Pack stories that he was telling, he wanted to animate, have a presence on YouTube so that everybody could see them. So I bought him some animation software, Anime Studio. I know nothing about it. When his teachers found out, Dale Meads, Jennifer Kennedy, they were so excited about hearing what he wanted to do. And for the longest time, we had heard about these characters, and now we got to see them. Here's Parker. Leonard. Boris. Bill. Doug. And I would like to show you now a clip from the first episode of Parker and his Pack. Can we show that clip, please?
Now that is an action sequence.
I'm as exhausted as a morbidly obese panda that dined on 10,000 pounds of bamboo in half an hour.
Now we can decide something to do.
Haven't eaten all day. Let's chow down.
Oui. Okay, let us see what places are worth picking at. Here's one, Hollywood Pizza. We are here, so we ain't not far.
Nice. Now we can dine like stars on the set. Oh, my appetite is so wet right now.
Let's go then.
Hi, welcome to Hollywood Pizza, where the pizza is fresh, crisp, and sizzling from the food truck. My name is Alfie. May I take your order?
What's the special, please?
The Will Ferrell Special?
We'll take that, please, with 5 triple dark chocolate The Parent Fraps. This is a creative pizza, with bacon being strips of film and meatballs being the reals. Anything you like, Boris?
I like the sizzling cheese. Bill?
I like how they made film reels and strips out of toppings. Doug?
I don't know, maybe the bacon. Leonard?
I like all of it.
That's nice, guys. I like the food film reels. Ooh, look at the time, my lifelong kemasabis. Let's go and hit the sheets.
Yeah. The animation is simplistic, but I knew nothing about this. But along the way, Liam learned geometry, he learned math, he learned editing, he learned language skills, he learned Apple Motion, he learned Modo. Are you familiar with Modo software? This crazy 3D software that Liam learned while he was a senior in high school. He actually took a class at the college campus near our house, and this is what he created from Modo, 3D wine barrels. I have no idea how you do this stuff. He's totally into it. He was totally excited about school, and this culminated in Liam doing his senior high school project on how he creates an animated series. Here's a little piece from that. Take a look.
What have you learned since you developed episode 1?
I learned if you're creative and patient enough, you can create an awesome cartoon that's prone to be enjoyed by all. Whoa. You mean you're behind what we do, what we say, where we go, and what we eat, not to mention the movies we see? Yes, Parker, I am behind all of that. Interesting. Yes, very interesting.
This gave Liam an identity. After this was shown at an assembly in his school where he told me, Dad, they stood up and applauded for me. He was not the special needs kid anymore. He was part of that community. It let him know who he was. It gave him something to do. He wasn't just the kid who sat at the lunch table and stimmed during lunch. He was part of that whole educational community. He would help other kids with projects that they had that they wanted to do with animation. You'll notice that one of the kids in that first clip had a slight speech impediment. Liam never even considered that. He said, I auditioned kids and he was the best kid for the part. That's how he views people. It gave him a sense of confidence. His teachers noticed the difference. He was more willing to participate in class. He would ask questions. He would make comments. He had an opinion. As I said before, school was his life at this point. And his life needs to be as good as it can be. All of this told me that the techniques I had used weren't working for him. The techniques that I used in my classroom didn't work anymore. We had to find a way to incorporate the way that Liam learned best. We had to find a way that he liked to learn and make that part of his educational plan. It involved computers on my part. It involved extra work on my part. But I did it because it made Liam happy and it moved Liam along. It was extra work for his teachers, but I'm telling you the truth, they were more than willing to do it. So that's what Liam does. I would like to tell you very quickly who Liam is. He is one of the kindest, most thoughtful, diligent people that I know. He is very proud of those cartoons, and he should be. Liam's compassion amazes me. People used to say kids with autism don't have any emotional abilities. Oh man, come on. I'll tell you one quick story. When Liam was in the 7th grade, he came home one day and he was very upset because there was some graffiti on a brick at school that said, F Mr. Kirkland. Mr. Kirkland was a school vice principal. Liam said if he sees that, he's going to be really upset. So I said, I don't know what to do, man. He said, I'm going to go to the office, I'm going to tell him it's there. I said, that's a good idea. Maybe they can get rid of it. Came home a couple days later and he said, Dad, it's still on the wall. And I said, I don't know. He said, Dad, it's really ugly and it's going to hurt his feelings. And I said, Liam, you've done whatever you can do. You did your job. Listen, Mr. Kirkland's the vice principal. It's not the first time he's heard that. But Liam said, I have an idea. I think I know what we can do. I said, what? He said, I say we get everybody together in the auditorium, we sit them down, and we say, now listen carefully. This is very serious. Who did this? It's funny, right? Gets a laugh every time I tell that story. Who's going to fall for that? But isn't that the way we want everybody to be? Huh? Don't you live your life wanting people to be honest and forthright and responsible for their actions and truthful? And yet when someone 12 or 13 years old does it, we think it's naive and silly and they're a bit dumb. He is a caring, generous, brilliant boy. And I would like to think that I had something to do with that. But looking back now, I know what I was trying to do. I was trying to change him. In the process of trying to make him just like everybody else, I was doing exactly what I said I didn't want people to do. They gave him a label, they lumped him under that autism umbrella, and I fell for it. I treated him exactly like I didn't want him to be treated. I heard that word, and I fell in line, man. But he is not like everyone else. He is Liam. And yes, at this point, he exhibits characteristics consistent with a diagnosis of autism, but that may change, and they might start calling it something else, but he will always be Liam. And he's not alone. 1 in 68 is being diagnosed with this now, and they're not all the same. They don't look the same or talk the same or walk the same or have the same nose. They're all just different, and they deserve to be treated as individuals outside and inside the classroom, and they deserve to be treated and taught in a way that they learn best. It might take extra time, it might take extra work on your part or my part, but it is well worth it. It is very easy to say that all autistic people learn the same. That is not true. There's a great quote that's been attributed to so many people, I don't know who said it first, but I love it. And the quote is, if you've met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. I had to learn, yeah. I had to learn that Liam could not be treated like everyone else, that he did not learn like everyone else, that his notion of success is different than mine, that his notion of happiness might be different than mine, and if it looks a little different, so be it. All those things make him all the more interesting. And he is not perfect. He's a typical 19-year-old boy, doesn't like my parenting style, thinks I butt in too much, but he is independent, he is thoughtful, and he is sweet. And he has every reason to be angry with the names that he's been called. He's not stupid. He's not on crack. He's not retarded. He is Liam. And as we move forward, he is a college kid who's looking forward to learning as much as he can about animation, to meet the goals that he has set for himself. And as his parents, we want him to live a full and happy life. We want him to be who he is. And that's not the way I have always thought. I haven't. He has to fit into a certain degree, but I don't want him to lose who he is. And again, that's not the way I always thought. For the longest time, I tried to fix him. I wanted to find a cure. I wanted him to get over this like you get over a cold or the flu. But I don't feel that way anymore. Because I understand that there is nothing to fix. Because there is nothing wrong with him. He is just different. And he is cool. He's a different kind of cool. A kind that we're not familiar with yet. And there's a world of people who are not ready for his type of cool. And he has to understand that. And I'm determined to enjoy him. This is a 19-year-old man who wants to hold hands with me. We walk down the street, and I will hold hands with him until the day he doesn't want to. He teaches us. I'm running out. I'm over. I'm really sorry. We were having a discussion one day about words. Here's the discussion. We were discussing French fries as opposed to home fries. And I said, Liam, which do you prefer? And he said, I don't know, Dad. I'm going to have to disambiguate between the two. And I said, now you're making up words. Well, he's not making up words. That's the definition of disambiguate. He gets it in a way we don't get it. He gets it in a literal way. He missed school one day. He asked me if I could find out what he had missed. So I got in touch with his teachers. I said to him, you have to read chapters 3 and 4 in The Great Gatsby. They took a quiz. You have to make it up. Make up that quiz. Okay. Came to me about 2 hours later with a page of paper with 12 questions and 12 answers. I said, you got in touch with Miss Kennedy and she told you what to do. And he said, nah. I said, what'd you do? He said, you told me I had to make up a quiz. I made one up. So I'll finish up and tell you that as we move forward, I need to understand that different is good. Throughout history, difference has been good. Da Vinci, Jobs, Gates, Edison. I had to learn that if we get past the fact that these people don't look exactly the way we look, that we enjoy them, that these are people who can contribute at a high level. And if we don't take the time to understand them, to talk to them, to learn from them, we are missing an awful lot. We are missing the opportunity and the chance to tap into that creativity and to grow ourselves. It might take a little more time. It might look like things we aren't used to seeing at this point, but we will get it. I did. It took me a while, and every day I'm reminded of who he is and why it makes him a more interesting person, a more interesting person. As parents, we want to imbue our children with a sense of hope and strength, and it isn't a stretch to say that Liam has done that for me. He has given me hope. He has taught me patience. He has let me know that you can do whatever you want to do if you just put your mind to it and you don't let people tell you you can't do it. There are things to look forward to in our lives every single day, and he tells me that. The most important thing is he has challenges. He does not have a disability. His disability lies in people who don't take the time to know him and understand him and get to know him for the person that he is, for the genuine, loving, caring person that he is. It might be frustrating at times. It might be hard to understand. But I'll tell you something. It's been frustrating for me. But we'll get to the point and we realize that there is something there. When we get to the point where we realize there's something there that we might have missed, when we get to the point where we start taking advantage of people for who they are and not what they look like or what they say, and when we get past the label and what the label says they are, when we get to that point, that would be really cool. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you.